Good afternoon, everybody, and welcome to EVCOM's weekly webinar, beg your pardon. We're delighted to have you with us this afternoon, where we'll be talking about recruitment and skills, particularly important and relevant going forward as to how we can all adapt to our current situation. Before I introduce you to our chairwoman for the day and our facilitator, could I just remind you that if you have any questions, the panel are more than happy to answer them. Please could you post them into the chat box, and they will be seen to as and when we go through the conversations and included where appropriate. And then before we proceed, can I also just remind everybody that next week we won't be doing a webinar like this, but we will be hosting something called the Freelancers Forum. So if anybody is a freelancer and working in that capacity, please do join us for a discussion and a get together and hopefully a bit of fun and an opportunity to just share successes and issues you might be facing currently. And then on the 11th of November, we have our next webinar, which is the wow factor. So quite a few things to look forward to in coming up. And then on the 19th of November, my regular plug for the EVCOM London Live and Film Awards ceremony. So hopefully as many of you as possible will register and come along to that. So without further ado, I shall pass you over to the facilitator of the day, Charlotte Gentry. Charlotte is the chairwoman of the EVCOM board and the owner of Pure Communications Group. And I will pass over to her and she will introduce the panel. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Claire, and welcome to everybody today. I'm sure it's going to be a really interesting conversation and one that's very, very pertinent over the course of this year, as I'm sure a lot of people are finding themselves in uncharted territory during these unprecedented times. So we're hoping that we can give some really solid advice to lots of people out there who may be more than ever in need of some good advice across the industry. So I am delighted to be joined by Liz Sinclair from ESP Recruitment, Kathy Alford from Searchlight, Pip Folsom from Pip Folsom HR. So thank you all for joining on the panel today. Liz, why don't you tell us a little bit about the business that you work for?
Okay, good afternoon, everyone. I run ESP Recruitment, which is a specialist agency for the events industry. We are a global recruitment agency and have been placing people in the events industry around the world for over 20 years. This is definitely uncharted waters and has been a very tricky 6 months, but we're still here and trying to help people, support them and help them with their CVs and obviously place some people in the jobs that are still available. We also launched an initiative for the industry about a month ago called NMA, which stands for New Model Army, which is sort of a charitable thing that myself and I have a partner, Trevor Foley from another agency, are trying to help people that are unemployed in the events industry by offering them support, CV advice, interview techniques, some upskilling, and also we're going to just about to create a database of all the unemployed people in the market that obviously want to put themselves forward, so that it's an easier place for those that are recruiting to find them.
Great, thank you very much, Liz. Kathy, tell us a little bit about Searchlight.
Hi there, yes. So Searchlight, I'm the MD of Searchlight. We've been recruiting and providing exec search to the media industry for about 20 years. We work right across the media, so everything from our clients in the studios, the broadcasters, production companies, but obviously we do a lot of work for EVCOM as well, for your members, whether it's production roles, design, senior finance, anything to do with that really. And we've been working a lot recently with some of the more junior people. We've been working with BAFTA, we've worked with the Media Trust, and here we are doing some work for EVCOM on helping people either starting their career in the industry or who need support in actually changing slightly in careers in terms of giving CV advice. So similar really to Liz, we're here to help if we possibly can, but there's not a lot around at the moment. So hopefully we can get some good discussions going today about how maybe we can actually help and support you in different ways.
Pip, thank you very much, Kathy. Pip, do tell us about Pip Folsom HR.
Hi, so I'm Pip. I'm a freelance HR consultant. I call myself an HR people person, just to brighten things up a bit. I've worked in HR for 20 years, employed roles across all sorts of different industries. And then in 2019, I went freelance. Same as everybody else, really. This year has been an interesting year from an HR perspective as well. But I work right across everything from, helping business owners with people problems, but I do focus around the recruitment area, probably on the other end of the process, really more on the kind of interviewing and selection side. So hopefully I can bring some of that experience to the discussion today, and looking forward to it.
Thanks a lot, Pip. I mean, I think that it's obviously a very difficult market for the event sector, and we've been hit very, very badly. And I'm sure that there are quite a few people maybe on the webinar today who are quite nervous about what this actually means for them and their careers. So I suppose to start with, I mean, what are you seeing as recruiters? What kind of demand are you seeing? And how, in terms of the amount of candidates that you're getting on a weekly basis? I think that might be quite interesting for people to understand. Perhaps Liz, you could kick off with that.
Okay, so during lockdown, there were pretty much no jobs whatsoever. I think we had one job in 3 months. Since it's eased and things are moving forward slightly, we are starting to get some jobs. Not so much on the event management side, more on the sales side and more on the exhibition side. And we work across the whole events industry, so different sectors have been hit differently. And I would say probably the event management agencies have sort of been hit the worst, actually, those and venues. So it has got slightly better, but obviously it didn't help the fact that Boris has put the start date off again for another 4 or 5 months or 6 months. So that really didn't help matters at all. So it is a very tough market, but there are a few jobs, and some agencies have them, but also a lot of people are using LinkedIn to advertise their jobs directly and then get recommendations. In terms of when we do have a job and we advertise it, I would say 2 of the most recent jobs I've had 500 plus applications for jobs that probably would, one of them was a contract for an association looking for an event manager. Normally that, because it was a contract, would probably get 30 responses. It got 500 after 2 weeks and I had to switch it off. So there's a lot of good people out there on the market at the moment.
Kathy, what are you finding within Searchlight? I mean, are you finding a similar scenario to Liz?
Yes, we are. I mean, to be honest, we've been quite busy from sort of May, June onwards. Although like Liz, I've noticed there is definitely a fall off again in the last couple of weeks. The freelance market, I'm surprised, has not come back as much as I thought it would from, freelance producers, editors, designers, that type of thing. We are dealing with a couple of producer roles, but a lot on the business development side. I've been handling 4 or 5 business development roles, but right across the industry. So, whether it's from a production company or an agency or a broadcaster, there is work out there. And I think, the key thing is that there are 500 applications, which is, sad of the state of the industry, but not necessarily the right people. And I'm still combing those 500 people to find the right candidates for the job. So, I would say to anybody applying, look at the job description and make sure that you have got the right skills and experience, because sadly, it's unlikely, you will get through at this stage because there are just so many people.
And just moving on from that, Pip, what do you think that you can do to actually help and make your CV stand out? And, in terms of trying to, if you're up against that number of people who are applying for certain roles, as Kathy said, which is very important, not applying if you haven't got the right experience is probably a good thing to do. But what other things do you think you can do?
I guess it's, as somebody in the receiving end of CVs, I suppose the challenge that I find is that every CV is laid out slightly differently. So I think you need to make your application stand out visually would be number one. So the use of colour or a bit of a cool layout, something like that, just to make it stand out in the pile of applications, and make the information on your CV easy to find for the recruiter. Because I think certainly for me, when you're going through and sifting through CVs, if you've got to hunt for stuff, that becomes quite tricky. So the easier you can make it for the person on the receiving end to find your skills and experience, the better. And for me, I do like a cover letter. I don't know if it's a moot point about whether they're a bit passé or not, but for me, it's an opportunity to kind of bring your personality through rather than just the CV, which is the information on the page. You can really kind of sell your personality and the experiences that you've got, and that you want to particularly draw to the recruiter's attention. So I think that's your opportunity, your sales pitch, if you like, to kind of try and stand out.
I guess, if you're getting, as agencies, if you're getting that many applicants, perhaps explain a little bit about the process that's involved when somebody does actually apply. So if you're applying completely cold and you've not had any form of contact with ESP or Searchlight or PIP Folsom in the past, what is the usual process? Do you go back to every single person that's applied? How does it work, Liz?
We, in the past, when it was sort of a normal amount of applications, we would go back with sort of a more personal response to most people. Those obviously that are relevant, we would interview. Those that aren't relevant but are a good candidate in this market, we would still interview, but not for that particular role. And those that weren't relevant, we would go back and tell them why. Now with 500 applications, you simply can't go back to everyone with a personal response. So we do go back in some respects to everyone. They always get a response, but it is a bit more generic now. And in terms of standing out, I think, as Pip said, a cover letter or a cover email is not a bad thing. But what I would say is, don't fall into the habit of putting all the juicy stuff in that cover letter and not putting it on your CV, because the cover letter may go to HR, but only the CV may go to the hiring manager. So if you put all your juicy achievements in your cover letter and not on your CV, the person that then later reviews the CV may not see those. So make sure they're in both, is what I would say. And as Pip said as well, make it clear and easy to read. But again, applying for jobs that aren't suitable for you isn't really a great idea at the moment.
Yeah.
Oh, sorry, Kathy, do go ahead.
Sorry, there were just a couple of things I wanted to add, which is really, really funny, and I can't totally get it, Pip. From your perspective, lots of colour and lots of format is great, and yes, they look beautiful. Sadly, from an agency perspective, we use databases. Obviously, from a GDPR perspective, we've got to make sure that your CV is logged safely, and we've also got to submit CVs to our clients through a database. Most databases, a lot of databases, cannot stand beautiful coloured, formatted PDFs. They just spit them out the other end. So we're always asking for very simple Word CVs. By all means, if you're a designer, then of course send something beautiful. But from my perspective, it's much more that every CV is tailored to the job. It's not a generic CV with a cover letter. It's a CV that, if I'm looking for a producer of short form content, that CV needs to show that you're a producer of short form content. If actually you're in marketing and you've produced a bit, and somewhere in there there's producing, but actually you're a marketing CV, it's highly unlikely that our client will understand and will want to go through a CV that's got some stuff in it. So I just say, really, really tailor your CV for the job you're applying for.
Do any of you also offer advice when you're interviewing candidates on how they can amend their CVs and indeed potentially produce more than one for different roles, depending on what kind of roles come through?
Always, yeah.
Always, absolutely. And actually, what the current market shows is there are a lot of people on the market that haven't been on the market for a while and probably haven't written a CV for 5 or 10 years. So we're spending a lot of time helping people with their CVs actually at the moment, a lot. I would say probably 90% of the CVs I get through need some guidance as to how to sell themselves. And what I would say at the moment is it is about selling yourself. I know it's not a very British thing to sell yourself, but you do really have to push your achievements. And there are so many candidates that send a CV that miss out really vital things that they've done. The responsibilities show what you do on a day-to-day basis, but the achievements show how well you do them. I interviewed a candidate the other day and I was talking to him about his background and what he'd done in his current job. And I said, what are your achievements? Oh, I tripled the number of stands, I tripled the revenue, and I tripled the number of visitors. That wasn't on his CV. Why wouldn't you put that on your CV? So don't be afraid to sell your achievements, because at the moment, there are lots of good candidates out there, but you've got to make sure you stand out as having, the best experience. You've excelled in your job rather than have just done your job on a day-to-day basis. Mm-hmm. Clients are looking for the best people, not just people that can do the job.
Bit of a controversial question, I guess, but do you find as recruiters that a client, so the end person is obviously looking for a candidate, is going and doing an exclusive deal these days with one recruiter, or do you find that actually you might find that job's on with a number of different recruiters? And I'm asking that question for those people who are online who might think, okay, should I go out and should I register myself with a number of different recruiters, or should I just focus on just registering with one?
Sorry, go on.
Do you want me to?
Sorry,
I would say to register with more than one agency without a doubt in this current market. But we are doing some exclusive deals with clients at the moment, purely because the amount of CVs to go through. If you're going through 500, 600 CVs, you want to be able to help them at the end of it and make the placement. But I would definitely suggest that that you register with a number of CVs and follow them on Twitter and LinkedIn so you can keep up with the jobs as and when they come in.
Pip, do you have any thoughts and feelings on that?
No, I guess I'd echo it. So from the sort of receiving recruiters end, I guess the only issue you can sometimes have if you register with more than one agency is that more than one place uploads an application, and then you've got a tricky issue of, I've got it from two places, what do I do? That's really for the employer to sort out behind the scenes. That's not the candidate's issue. But I would hope if an employer was aware that there was if an agency was aware there was a vacancy and another agency also had it, that they would actually flag it and say, actually, we're already recruiting for that, or have you applied for anything else? Ask the candidate, and if they mention it, then say, okay, we are recruiting for that as well, but obviously you've already been uploaded. So it can cause issues in the background, but I don't think from the candidate's perspective that's something to worry about necessarily. It's about, if you do register for multiple agencies, kind of keep the lines of communication open and talk to them about the roles that they've got and who those roles are with, and make sure that you're not just sort of being put forward for absolutely everything. Be selective and talk to the agencies about the roles that you're being put forward for in detail to really understand what you're being put forward for. And then I think you'll identify if you're being submitted multiple times.
And what do you, we've obviously talking about the slight sort of doom and gloom scenario of the volume of people that are applying for jobs at the moment. But what do you think are the opportunities at the moment for people who are very determined and driven and potentially could look at diversifying their service offering? Kathy, do you have any thoughts on that?
Yeah, it's interesting because there are still gaps in the market. It's how far you want to diversify. I know from a sort of digital perspective, there is still a shortage of the UX people, but also digital marketing. We do get regularly asked for digital marketers, and they're not necessarily looking for somebody across the board. They're actually looking for somebody with specific skills. So I think there's always an opportunity to upskill from a digital perspective. We were just chatting yesterday, there's amazing amount of courses online at the moment which are free. And if you're not working at the moment, or maybe working part-time or freelance, it is an opportunity just to maybe upskill in some of those areas, which may just give you more opportunities because you can actually offer that as well.
Absolutely. Pip, do you have any other thoughts on that?
Yeah, I guess generally probably the same as most industries. If this situation this year has taught us anything, I think having flexibility and adaptability and the ability to not rely on one area solely is probably a good thing. And I think that's something that is set to continue for the future. So I guess the more multi-skill you are and the more adaptable you are to be able to change onto something else if the need requires it, that's only going to be a good thing. And it doesn't have to be forever. You can multi-skill and use that skill for a period and then go back to something else if that's your real passion and you want to get back into that as those markets open back up. It's a difficult situation. Some of this is needs must, but actually you could discover something that you really love doing that you might not have considered before. It's not necessarily retraining, it's sort of extra training, if you like. So it's ways of discovering new avenues for you, I think.
We've actually had a question around, and a very valid question, around advice for graduates who are actually who've just left college having done an event management degree, now thinking, oh, crikey, how do I get into the job market? I mean, obviously what we've been talking about is people who've had probably quite a long-standing career and maybe are having to rethink about their skill set. What would advice be to graduates trying to get into this market currently? Liz, do you have any thoughts?
Yes, I mean, I think it's always the same for graduates, that it is quite tricky to get your first job in events, because it's always been a competitive market for graduates. So I think it's all about getting some kind of experience, whether it's voluntary with a charity, trying to do as many, events you can at college, and try and be specific about what you're trying to gain experience in. So, a lot of students that do event management degrees, for example, love the whole festival side of things, and will always work at all the festivals. Or unless you're going to go into festivals after, then you might as well, be working sort of in Sainsbury's. It's not giving you the same experience you need. So try and get some work experience at university, running, events at university, or running your own charity events to raise funds, or as I said, volunteering for charities and other companies, and getting internships, because events is pretty much all about gaining experience. So that's what I would suggest. While the market is as it is, offer your services for free. I'm sure lots of companies will take you up on the opportunity at the moment when they've had to make people redundant, just to gain some experience. It'll be beneficial for you. And you never know, it could turn into a permanent job.
Kathy, have you had many graduates applying with you over since lockdown? Or
yeah, we've had a lot of graduates, and I mean, the feedback I've been giving is really quite similar. But I think the one thing that we should all just sort of say is, don't give up hope. This is a little blink in time, and if you don't end up working in events for the next year, it doesn't mean that you're not going to get your career of choice eventually. So, I think at the moment, nobody's going to judge you if you don't get in immediately straight from university. Just do whatever you can, even if it is working Sainsbury's, as Liz says, because it's all just shows that you've actually got something on your CV. But nobody's going to judge you that you didn't go straight from uni. I think that's really important, just not to lose hope at the moment.
Yeah, of course, absolutely. We've actually had another very, very good question from Anna about upskilling, which is an area that we wanted to discuss anyway. And it's around digital marketing. I mean, obviously, everybody at the moment is talking about the different areas that you can upskill in within the industry. And the tech/digital marketing arena is obviously one that everyone is talking about, but it is very, very broad as a definition. Are you finding that there are more roles available within sort of social media, or is it online advertising or SEO website stuff? What kind of, or all of those roles sort of lumped in together when you're seeing those roles come on board, Liz?
I mean, digital marketing has been important for many years, as the sort of marketing style has changed. So having those skills is always important. I suppose what we're seeing now actually is people that have got more experience in delivering hybrid or online events. So companies that run exhibitions, conferences, that are now putting those online this year. So we're having a lot of people asking for those kind of skills. So knowing how to pivot from a live event to an online or hybrid event, for those skills on delivery. And then what will follow after that is how to market that style of event rather than a live event, which will have slightly different messaging. So I think it's just tweaking the digital marketing to be focused on online events and delivery of those. And there is an organisation called the Virtual Events Institute that run a course on that, where you can get certified after doing 10 modules on all aspects of online event delivery, from marketing, selling sponsorship on those events, the technical side, how to market them, how to make sure you get the ROI. Because I think, this year a lot of companies have pivoted to that just, while we were waiting to find out. But I think it will continue to be part of them, the marketing mix, to have a hybrid event with an online aspect to it, or more content style events throughout the year online. So that kind of experience is definitely something that people should develop.
And Kathy, are you finding that the roles that you're bringing on board are more around this area?
Yeah, there are two sorts. I mean, with a caveat, there's not a lot at all at this precise moment. But generally, I think there's two sorts. There's slightly more digital in terms of the actual tech side. So certainly with the online, the streaming, that type of thing. But then from the digital marketing, as I've noticed in the chat here, yes, I mean, SEO is a big one. I can never say this word, programmatic marketing, where actually you're looking at how consumers are actually approaching it, how long they stay on a page, all that type of thing. There's a lot of roles there which are quite specific, and also e-commerce. E-commerce is growing hugely. So everything to do with the marketing, whether that is just managing the e-commerce side, whether it's the marketing of it, the analytics, they're all quite big, specific, on all that area really.
Do you think it's worth talking about events now in a much wider arena and more from a communications perspective? And perhaps people should be talking about that more on their CVs, with events being a part of that larger, broader service offering. Do you think that might open more doors, Pip?
Yeah, I think there's certainly no harm, is there? And I guess a lot of this comes back to the point about visibility, doesn't it? The more that you're out there and you're doing as much as you can possibly do and you're being seen, that's only going to help. Using social media to your benefit and all of those things. And there's lots of tools that I've seen out there to help encourage that and give you hints and tips of how to use that to your best advantage.
We've had another question from Bansi, who very sadly started a new job in April, but subsequently lost that job due to COVID. Is it worth mentioning, even though the job never really started, is it worth mentioning it on the CV from the point of view that there's a gap in employment? Do you think that's worth explaining on a CV, Liz?
If you didn't really start, then probably not. I mean, this ordinarily you would say, to try and fill the gaps. This year is an extraordinary year. And, I'm sure it'll be known as, the COVID year. Hopefully it won't be much longer. So I don't think anyone should worry about, what kind of job they've done in the last 6 months, if they've got a gap in their, CV, if they're on furlough. Employers know exactly what's happened. So I think it's just, best you can talk about that in an interview, but I don't think it's a massive problem if you have a gap at the current time on your CV. Everyone knows what the current state of the market is. So I would hope that employers would not have a problem if there is a gap on your CV, and you can explain that you were offered a job. And, a number of people have been offered jobs that have been withdrawn, unfortunately, because it happened around lockdown. So it's not unusual. So again, don't be embarrassed by it. It's just an extraordinary time, and, people will understand.
Do you think that, and I guess, I don't know whether people are wanting to, or whether you find that people are wanting to take jobs industry side in terms of agency and supplier side, or whether they're looking for corporate roles. But do you think it's worth applying for more roles if they're there corporate side instead? Kathy, maybe?
I would imagine that, yes. I mean, I think at the moment, it's any role that fits your background, it's worth applying for. Because both are valid. So therefore, you may want to go in-house for a couple of years, gain that experience anyway of actually being, client side, corporate side, because it does offer you a full different set of skills. So indeed, I would say it would be actually good for you. If you've only worked agency side, it would actually be a good thing to do.
I suspect some people feel a bit concerned maybe if they've worked agency side going into corporate. So taking away that I don't know, that confidence angle, I suppose, of adapting, and it's not that easy, and everybody's having to adapt in this market. Lucy has posed a question, which is around, do you foresee a lot of those made redundant going back to their original companies when work returns? Pip?
It's an impossible question to answer to a large extent, that one. I'm not sure I can give you a definite yes or no. I think at the moment we're still in this period of uncertainty. So I think, we need to get to a position where we understand that we're kind of pretty much out the other end of this. And then I think there's a sort of rebuilding piece. And it's a bit like when we had the recession back in 2008. I don't know how many of your viewers were around then, but I was sort of just starting my more senior HR career then. And similar thing, lots of winding back of companies. And it took a little while, if I'm honest, to get back to where it was beforehand. So I don't think it's just going to be a big bang, but I think the level of restriction that's happened with COVID will mean that there is a sort of flurry of activity. Now, what that activity looks like, I think, is difficult to predict. And I also think businesses will take this as an opportunity to, review their structures, review their size, review their direction. So what you might see is not exactly the same roles, but you might see them recruiting different roles, new roles, if they've decided to go in a different direction. So that's probably the best answer I can give you at this point. I don't know if anyone else has a different view on that, but I feel a bit put on the spot to say yes or no, and I don't have a yes or no.
Well, hopefully opportunities will pop up at different companies. So, if you've been working for a company where there's 4 or 5 competitors in the market, you may not end up wanting to go back to the same company, but new jobs will pop up. And if you do that, have that experience, they're going to want you if you've got relevant skills. So, I do think that as time goes on, hopefully by the spring, there will be quite a few opportunities available as the market grows again.
Sure. And just thinking about freelancers for a moment, and I know that there's a lot of freelancers in the marketplace who are struggling at the moment. It's one of the key areas where there's been no support really at all, certainly government support. What advice would you give to freelancers trying to get work? And are you finding, so it's a double-pronged question actually, are you finding that there's have you had an influx of temporary contracts in terms of short-term contracts as opposed to permanent, Kathy?
To freelancers, just hang on in there. It is a really, really hard market for you guys, and I really accept that. No, there haven't been that many temporary contracts, which I was actually quite surprised about, because I thought quite a few of our clients would want that, either freelance or temporary. But no, we're finding they're not. They seem to be struggling on with who they've got. What I am finding is that some people are being made redundant from companies. The people left are then working 14-hour days, which is really not a good way to be. But companies have streamlined because they're panicking or don't have the resources, but they're overworking the people who are left. So hopefully in the next couple of months they'll realise this and actually start bringing people on, even if it is only temporary or freelance.
Yeah, sure. Liz, do you have any tips for freelancers that are thinking, help, what do I do now?
Yeah, no, it's tough at the moment. And I again thought the same thing, that there would be more contract roles. At the moment they're not, because again, as we said, the events aren't potentially opening fully until April next year, so there are less jobs, and the jobs we're tending to find coming in are a few maternity covers, which is still something that freelancers can do. But I suspect when in the run up to events opening up again, which will probably be January, February, I suspect there probably will be quite a lot of freelance jobs around then, when companies just want to parachute people in the run up to an event to to either organise it or do the last parts of selling sponsorship or whatever. So I think it will get better. We just have to bear in mind that IR35 comes in next year in April, and hopefully the government will postpone that, because that could obviously have a bit of an issue for people in the freelance market. So that should be the next thing that the associations are pushing government for, really, is to postpone the IR35 rules.
Sure. Do you think, we've had a very interesting question from Maria, do you think that because of the amount of applicants, Do you think this means that salaries are going to be deflated, or there's more bargaining power because it's an employer's market, so to speak? Pip, what do you think about that?
It's not something that I've noticed. I mean, probably Liz and Kathy would be better qualified to answer it because they're seeing more of the jobs that are available. But certainly what I'm seeing is being advertised at what I'd see as a benchmarked rate. But I don't know in terms of the volume that's out there. What are you guys seeing? Because I don't know if I'm seeing the full picture really.
No, I'm not seeing any reduction in salaries at all. All the jobs that we've placed in the last 6 months have all been market rate. And will match the person. Nobody's sort of gone, oh, because it's COVID, we can knock 20% off at all. They've matched what the candidate has been looking for, which is encouraging. So I think, yes, the general feeling is that might happen, but I've not seen it so far.
Liz, I'm assuming that, from your perspective, you're not saying that people are trying to get a bargain.
No, they're not. But I would say that before this happened, the couple of years before this happened, it was very much a candidates market where candidates could really push the salary upwards and go for big rises in the next job. And I would say that isn't necessarily happening. But I think, and also candidates are a bit more flexible about the kind of salary they would go, they would take now. But I don't think at the moment employers are taking advantage.
Okay, well, that's good to hear. Do you think there's been, it may be that there's a gap in the market for creatives? I mean, it's always been very hard, I think, to find really, really good creatives in the market. Do you think that there's more demand now for creative talent in the market at the moment? Kathy?
I haven't noticed a particular increase in demand. I think good creatives are always in demand. I think because obviously, certainly from what's being produced over the last few months, that's just generally reduced. But no, I can't say there's been an increase necessarily.
Okay, it's interesting. Liz, have you found that people have asked for more creative designers and?
Not at the moment, really. As I said, there are less jobs out there at the moment, but I hope it's growing. But at the moment, what we're seeing, and this tends to happen, is it quite often starts with a lot of business development salespeople, which then start building the work for them to get the delivery and the creative in at a later stage. So I would say that the best creatives probably stuck with the companies they were with. So there is that sort of in-house ability already. So I wouldn't say there is a massive increase in the creative jobs at the moment.
I mean, how are you sitting? Nobody's got a crystal ball, but if one was to add any positive or optimistic light into this conversation and to give people on who are listening to this some kind of hope, would you expect there to be hopefully a bit of an uplift in opportunities between now and Christmas, looking ahead to next year?
I think sort of 3 weeks ago, I would have been incredibly positive about that because there definitely was an upward trend. I do see a reduction in activity in the last couple of weeks since the sort of tier 2 stuff. However, I really fundamentally believe that it's not going to come to a complete stop again. The companies that we're working with are continuing to work. They're struggling on. They're not just shutting down like they did in April. So I wouldn't be surprised if there was a good steady trickle between now and Christmas, and maybe into January and February, where January and February are usually really quiet. Maybe they won't be this year because things will continue going, and maybe by then things will be on the mend. So I think we've got to remain positive.
Yeah, sure. And what about you, Liz? What are your thoughts on that?
I think we're starting to get more senior roles at the moment that are a bit more strategic, where they're looking for, perhaps having had a restructure, they can look at new people to come in at a senior level to perhaps pivot their business slightly differently. And also there's some people that have that opportunity to take voluntary redundancy, they've taken it, and therefore those senior roles will become available. What I would say though is, this industry is a global industry, and although we're quite behind the mark in the UK because of, we're not allowed to run events, bigger events till April, the rest of the world are running events. For some reason, the UK government don't seem to want to help our industry. But globally, there are, Asia is open for events, Europe is open for events, the rest of Europe's open for events. So those global companies will hopefully carry on running those events from here. But overseas, it's just hopefully we need to catch up and start running the UK events now.
Sure, absolutely. In terms of being proactive, I'm aware that we're sort of closing in on time is sort of wearing thin. I think we've got another couple of minutes left. In terms of being proactive and in terms of what people are doing to actually find whatever jobs are out there, aside from signing up with a number of recruitment agencies, what other fundamental tools do you think people should be looking at to actually make sure that they've covered all bases, Liz?
Well, I think being really proactive online is a really good thing. A lot of jobs in the past have been found through networking, and obviously you can't do that now, but you can online network. So, joining lots of groups, following companies that you're interested in. If a company you're interested in makes a comment or posts something, make a comment. Link in with the HR people if they would post a report about the company, make a comment. Obviously, only if it's relevant to the particular report they've posted, and obviously don't do it too much. But just being visible online, I think, is really important. Scouring LinkedIn because people are putting things up directly, and looking out for them, as we said, following recruitment agencies, and just being proactive, and also trying to upskill while you can with free courses. Just anything you can add to your CV is positive. So just being visible, I think, online, and just being try and keep positive and be patient that things will turn around, really.
Kathy or Pip, do you have any other things that might not have been covered on that?
I think that covers most things, actually. I think the one thing I would say is that, I'm just going back to LinkedIn, make sure your profile is as potentially as good as possible, as eye-catching as possible. Make sure there is a picture of you. Don't just put what you've done in terms of the companies you've been at. Actually put more details in, put your achievements, because I use LinkedIn all the time to search, and actually it's frustrating if I look at somebody and I think, where they've worked is really good, but I don't know what they've been doing. So, really actually just put some detail. It doesn't have to be your whole CV, but put some detail so that people can find you. Also, go to all the companies you want to work for and make sure you've signed up to their own careers website, because they won't necessarily post it on LinkedIn. They won't use a recruiter. They will recruit themselves because they've got their own in-house recruitment team. So make sure that you've signed up to all their careers website in case actually anything comes through.
Yeah, I think I'd echo all of that. I think the proactivity is the key. I don't think in the climate you can wait for the jobs to come to you. So you've got to do everything you can to go to the jobs and kind of be at the front of the queue. So creating those relationships, as Liz said, being visible, popping up in those people's timelines on comments and engaging with what they're doing. I think that all helps you be seen. And yeah, certainly from the searching perspective, make sure you're using LinkedIn to your advantage. There are various people out there who are running free sessions at the moment because of COVID about how to improve your profile and how to really get it up to scratch. So yeah, I think just social media, so much of it is free now, so you might as well use it to your fullest advantage to help yourself.
I think we've probably got time for one more question from Eva. I apologise if I haven't pronounced your name correctly. Do you think that in the future employers will predominantly be looking for professionals who have experience with virtual events? Do you think that's something that's fundamental now, Liz?
Yes, in a word. Yeah, I would say so. I think there's going to be an element of virtual events ongoing now. I think this has been a bit of a sort of something that's happened to the industry that's made everyone really think. I think before everyone was happily going along, and obviously I totally believe that live events are the key, the most important thing as opposed to virtual. But I think virtual will be part of the mix ongoing now forever, actually. So I definitely think it's as part of the mix, not a standalone. So I definitely think it's worth getting that experience if you can, learning about the different technologies, different platforms, and trying to use it if you're in a job at the moment, and if not, trying to train on it.
Great. Pip or Kathy, do you have anything to add with that?
No, not on that. I think Liz is right. It's a bit the theme that we've said all along. You know, if you can multi-skill and learn new skills, then at the moment I would be doing that. If you've got the time and the ability to do that, then take advantage. You know, the more you can do to get those skills on your CV, the better at the moment.
Great. Claire, I don't know how we're doing on time.
Time is up. Time is up. It is 4:45. So thank you all. Thank you to our audience members who contributed questions. It's always really beneficial to a platform like this to have our audience participate and get real questions. And without further ado, could I thank Liz Sinclair at ESP Recruitment, Kathy Alford from Searchlight, Pip Fulsham from Pip Fulsham HR, and thank you to our wonderful Charlotte, chairwoman of EVCOM. Thank you all for taking part, and a quick reminder that next Wednesday we've got our freelancer forum. All welcome. Again, hopefully we'll be able to provide some resources and some help to smooth your path. And then next month we have our wow factor. So that'll be a particular interest for those trying to create wow factor through virtual events. So thank you all once again, and hope to see you again soon. Bye.
Bye-bye.
Bye.
Bye.